Welcome everyone to MMA Podcast 2025. Your host, Amit Thakur, Managing Partner, Paymaker with WPP Media. With this podcast, we'd like to understand that the year of 2025, which saw rapid evolution in consumer trends, how it impacted businesses, and what were the key observations and learning that we would want to pick up, right? And then we leap forward into 2026 and what will drive growth for businesses and brands in 26. With the set of guests that we have today, we'll go a deeper into understanding the larger healthcare industry and how communication and storytelling actually drives that business and creates an impact in people's life. And with that, I would like to welcome our first guest, Mr. Luan, Marketing and Commercial Director for Merck Sharp Tom Company. Welcome on board.
Thank you.
And we also have with us Mr. Mishra, Saby Mishra as we know him in Vietnam, CEO of MullenLowe and Mishra. Welcome, Saby.
Thank you.
Great. So we have been through 2025 and gone through this journey at our end with our businesses. I would like to first start to understand a little more what has been your journey before we deep dive into understanding 2025, but from your experiences in the country and anything that you would want to share from the larger perspective.
Thanks, Amit. Until now, I have 15 years working in healthcare industry across medical device, Vietnamese listed pharmaceutical companies, and also currently I'm working for Merck Sharp & Dohme, like you said, for 15 years already. So I have been pharmacist, a graduation, and after that, I see there's a need to change the environment of pharmaceutical marketing to approach the customer, to educate them, to provide more value to them, not by the traditional one, which usually company only allocate the functional message to the consumer only. So I see that need. So that's why I joined several master courses, include Master of Marketing from Paris Sorbonne and later on MBA to manage the whole business by the Sydney University. And so
that's an interesting journey, right? And I think you touched upon saying how we impact consumers through storytelling. I think we'll discuss that more as part of podcast. Saby, over to you. Why don't you share a bit about yourself?
All right, I'll work backwards. I'll work this backwards. I've done, completed about close to about 20 years in Vietnam, close to thereabouts 20 years in Vietnam market, which is interesting because I've seen this market from early days of growth to sort of evolution, and it's sort of the way it has gone through significant reforms in marketing and domestic consumption growth. I worked across WPP and IPG agencies, worked with some fantastic client partners, agency people, media agency, creative agencies, all of that, and really been part of a growth journey for some of the biggest international companies in Vietnam, as well as a lot of domestic companies across the years. It's a great market. And before that, I started working my journey started in India, where I'm from India, and I studied there, and I have sort of started working there in the advertising and marketing business. So yeah, and at some point in time, I moved here, and that's been the journey.
Great. And, it sort of connect the dots when I talked to you off the set when we were working on the side that the journeys have been very similar for each one of us, where I also started Saby back in India in the media and advertising industry. And then again, going through the region from Indonesia to Malaysia and now in Vietnam, and home for Vietnam for last about 8 years. So great. Great knowing you, and it's an inspiring journey that you've had. We look forward to having this conversation and understanding from this what are the key insights that we can learn from and people and audience can take out from, and how do we manage to leverage these for 2026, right? So let's deep dive and start the conversation for getting a sense of how the year was, right? It has been a whirlwind this year with the advent of AI. It's been the talk for so long. We've had a long discussion and conversations on tariff, right? And different markets where went through this journey in a different manner and got impact for different industries, right? So, Mr. Luan, why don't I start with you? Healthcare is a very important factor for any country, right? And your company is a leading company in the market. How did you see 2025 faring from a lens of consumer behavior evolution and also for your business?
If we talk about the big change in this year, I can point out three main points. The first one is that the whole society and also the Ministry of Health want to focus into the prevention rather than treatment. So in the recent 20 years, 30 years, we spend a lot of resources into the treatment. But now the MOH, the Ministry of Health and the whole community is moved in advance that they need to repair, to protect themselves before they get the disease. So that's why in the last years, we see at least 8 different circulars or resolutions or guidance from the government that focus into the prevention. This is the first one. And the second one is that we see the consumer trend that they proactively protect their health, improve their health rather than treatment. We can see a lot of wellness, a lot of food supplements, a lot of vitamins, for example, that well performed in this year rather than previous years. This is the first one that moving into the prevention. Yes. And the second one is that digital healthcare is really improved in this year. That we see that from 2027, the first time that the government legitimized the teleconsultant. Yeah, now on the patient, on the consumer can pick up the phone and get the remote consultation from the HCBs, or even they can have the electric prescription from the HCBs. No need to meet face-to-face or waiting for a long time in the hospital. This is the big move.
That's one of the key things which you mentioned, right? Because that's how leveraging technology. So while technology evolves, how each company or industry actually leverages it to benefit for the brand as well as for the consumer. Right? Given a great example of that.
And also, more than that, not only teleconsultant, but from this September of 2025, the government instruct all of the hospital have to implement the electronic medical record. So now every record of medicines, of medication, of the disease treatment will be centralized at the centers of data from the government. So the government can analyze the disease and also make the decision from it. And like you say, as an implication, the healthcare manufacturers like MSD and other pharmaceutical companies can leverage that kind of digital platform to provide more value to the consumer, to the patient. Yeah, not only the product, but the service, the additional value that the companies can provide.
Great. And again, I'm also trying to draw analogies that most developing economies within the region, right, would have seen this cycle, right? Whether we talk about India or China or Indonesia, closer to Vietnam, where we have seen that once there is a fair amount of self-sufficiency that the countries reach, they actually focus on the larger benefit for the audiences. And like you rightly said, moving to prevention, right? And once we move to that, like there's a lot of planning that's required of how to make sure that consumers also are aligned with the larger agenda of the government, right? And therefore, it's not easy because consumers think differently or at different levels. So, Saby, at this stage, what are the key trends that you have seen from a consumer lens, right, which has shaped 2025 and impacted businesses equally?
To answer the question, I just want to step back for a bit and we look at Vietnam as a consumer market at a slightly larger context. So first of all, I think what we all have seen that this country has made in about 30 years, it has made a tremendous stride from a economy that was not really it was not anywhere near in the forefront in the global economy to become a global manufacturing hub. I think that is really significant. Number two, I think it has built with 100 million population. It's probably 56 million middle class by 2030. This is by far one of the fastest growing and most important domestic consumption stories in the world that is in the making. That is significant. When when we talk about marketing of any category, definitely for healthcare.
We've seen that having a large middle class is the stepping stone.
Yeah. And at the speed at which Vietnam has done it, I mean, compared to, I think this is one of the fastest from where they have gone to this stage. And that is pretty significant. Third, it's a digital economy which is on steroids. I think the way the adoption of digital behaviors at scale among population, be it commerce or, telecom or internet, everything in terms of data, information, entertainment, premiumization, everything that has been significant. Fourth, I think Vietnamese consumers, and I worked in other markets in Southeast Asia, which I didn't want to mention that, but in the beginning, I think the adoption rate is really fast in Vietnam. When there is something that is new, innovative, and the Vietnamese people, consumers are very pragmatic. When they see a benefit in it, they will go for it. So there is not a lot of barrier. They will definitely check it out, but it has to work for them. So I think given that, I think it's a very interesting market, and where this market in the last 2 or 3 years, the consumer side, domestic side, the sentiment has been a bit down. But I think it's going into 26 with double-digit growth rate, GDP rate. The sentiment is a lot better. And I think that 25 has been a year, to your question, Amit, has been about really coming to terms with, okay, the last 3 years have been sort of been a bit low sentiment by Vietnam standards, because Vietnam has had tremendous years of growth before. But this is, in a way, has been a year of reset for a lot of marketing companies that we work with. And as an agency leader, we work across categories from FMCG to health to electric mobility, so on and so forth. And we see that there is optimism going into 2026. There is double-digit growth. But at the same time, there is also realization that, hey, there are two sort of dual trends which are taking place. So at one level, there are consumers who are downtrading, they're value conscious, and so on and so forth. So for them, pure play sort of optimism storytelling is not going to work. I think we've seen that. It worked in the past. It's not going to work in the future, period. So that is critical. At the same time, there are certain categories where consumers are ready to pay a premium if they're seeing value, e.g. healthcare, e.g. electric mobility, or several such premiumization categories. So I see that is the trend that is happening. So going into 26, two things are critical. So value, there are certain categories where brands marketing have to drive value stories and make it really worthwhile for consumers, because consumers are becoming mindful about those things. The other side, they're also ready to pay higher for more meaningful categories.
And that's the part of selective intelligence, for example. So the wealth generation takes its own time, and when people are shifting or moving from one bracket to other, they're choiceful of where is it that they want to spend, right? And that's what the trend that you have observed.
And because the economy has been soft, so they are conscious about value also. Yeah. So it's not that they're going crazy and spending on anything and everything. So they will be more downtrade on things. Yeah. Well, you are from the media industry, Amit. What do you think? Well, how was it?
I mean, I couldn't agree more, both with you, Saby, and with Luan, that we have also been seeing consumers from a larger Vietnam perspective getting divided or segmented into different genres in terms of the wealth that they build. And also, therefore, that is leading to the choices that they make, right? One thing that we have seen, again, from a media lens, is how consumers have started to adopt media and technology for different aspects of life, right? From a few years back to just a couple of screens that they were watching at, the large screen versus a mobile phone, to a number of platforms that a consumer engages with today, right? For anybody in our lives, right, when we use a phone, it's from entertainment to information to even our regular apps, such as a banking app, or you have a medical app now. And I can imagine how companies like yours, moving to a telehealth kind of prompter that you just mentioned, using technology further, right? So one of the key things that we have been observing with a keen eye, Saby, to the question that you asked, from a media lens is how technology is evolving and what is that media can do in order to leverage those again to connect with consumers at the right moment, right? And we'll, of course, discuss more as we get into our discussion for 2026, right? So great. I think let's take a step forward and try to understand from what you shared, Luan, as 2025 key things, right? Further to that, what are the business opportunities that you saw in 2025 or what impacted more so for your business, for your industry, from a consumer lens as well as from your brand's perspective?
For you on site, the share voice is the problems of the consumer when they have multiple choice, not only in healthcare, but other F&B, FMCG as well. And when it comes to the healthcare, they will have multiple options to choose. Is it food supplements, the traditional medicines, or prevention solutions? And within prevention solutions, so from 2023, when the new circulars implemented in Vietnam, there's multiple products in multiple disease areas that launched in Vietnam. So that's why the consumer don't have more money. Yeah, but they have to choose which product, which areas that they will invest in. So in order to win the share of mind, share of healthcare wallet, this is the key problems, but also at the same time the opportunity for the business if we can own the moment, on their mind, on their attention into our areas in our product. So that's why in 2025, we as MSD manufacturers with the Saby media agency, we collaborate with the Ministry of Health to launch the national campaign to increase the public awareness regarding to the HPV. HPV is the virus that causes the cervical cancers, anal cancers, and many types of cancers related to that virus. But not many people in Vietnam know about that. Even they know about that, they don't know how to prevent that kind of disease and kind of cancers. So we see the vision, the mission to increase the whole community awareness about that disease, that prevention solutions. We have to own that team. We have to graft their intention to that areas, and then the business will follow. So
great point, right? Where you're saying that there's a fair amount of education that needs to be done. And when, especially in industry or brands like yours, when you get into that education model, that requires fair amount of attention from the consumers because they must understand the product itself and the implications of it, but equally the trust part, right? And so coming to you, Saby, then how do you see, or is it a challenge for you that you think for an industry like this or brands like MSD, how do you build trust through the communication, through the content that you have for consumers?
Interesting question. Okay, so I think that as the market is evolving, consumers have to make more choices. There are more categories they have to think about, which is meaningful for them. Example, preventive healthcare is a great category. First of all, it's a high cost entry. The cost of entry is much higher than buying a oral care product or a soft drink. Okay. Second, there is also lack of knowledge. There is apprehension, there is anxiety, there is not enough right information, which is what marketing companies are actually trying to build now, which is great, which is helping consumers. So I think that therefore now communication templates, and I've been saying this for a while now this year, that the way we have been, and I'm talking about media agencies, creative agencies, anyone who's doing any content anywhere, even even influencers, whatever that we're doing, we've been fundamentally driving brands through excitement and storytelling, creative storytelling. Consumers, since in the newer categories like preventive healthcare or healthcare in general, or even electric mobility, these sort of categories, that is not good enough. It doesn't build trust. That doesn't build. I can tell you what doesn't build trust. That doesn't build trust. Consumer is looking at, first of all, much more more information, more real, authentic information, credible information. Number two, consumer is looking at high quality product and anything that proves to him or her that yes, this formulation or the science, deep science products. It is coming from science. It's not just, just some claim level category or a product or just a nice packaging or a color or something. None of that works here. Third, as I said, is the high cost of entry is higher. And also the gratification is delayed. So it's not something that you have now and you can see the benefit today. You don't see it. You probably, which is good if you don't sort of see, because you sometimes don't have the problem right in front of you. What do you need to address? So preventive healthcare, for example, consumers don't have the problem right now. So why should they spend $500 for something which they don't have a problem right now, which probably they will not even have in the future? Even if it goes away, they will not know. So this is the most tricky challenge for all agencies, for all communication people that are going to deal with this. Last but not the least, what is happening is that these products are not something people just go and buy in a store. They need ecosystem. They need healthcare provider. They need, people who can advise them. They need a center that can give them the product. They can go back for referencing, blah, blah, blah. It also needs government, the corporation, the company, all of them working together like an alliance. That's a big one. So same also going to be electric mobility because there's a lot of education required. Consumers in Vietnam, we are working on, I can't reveal the name, we're working on a very significant electric mobility company which is coming into Vietnam. Fantastic technology. Consumers have a certain perception of that technology and a lot of that is just made up in their minds. They think it's, but what they don't know is that they don't know the specifics. So they need to be educated. If they don't have that, they can't make the call. They can't make the decision. So therefore, I think there isn't a simplistic solution to say, okay, we do this and it can build trust. I think this is going to be about really winning trust by driving education, credibility, the reliable information, building the ecosystem that the consumer feels that, okay, I'm making the right decision, I have the right information, this is a critical product, and they go into it and start to feel the trust. And
so I think wonderful. And I really like some of the point that you said because, the gratification is not immediate. You have to understand or make the consumer rather understand what are the implications for future, right? And there's a fair amount of imagination that you have to create through your comms, right, in the minds of consumers. And sometimes it's taken the route of fear. Sometimes it's taken the route of, what they would see as not doing it and therefore the implication on themselves or their family members, right? And so it's a balance, I can imagine, that you would want to drive, and equally through, the choices of, therefore, the platforms that you make to engage with or land your message onto certain platforms, right?
I'd like to add one more thing critical again in the healthcare space and definitely in deep science, preventive healthcare, Mr. Luan knows about it, is the regulatory.
Yep.
You have to be to 100% compliance with the existing regulatory environment in that market. These are serious products. These are not like casual products.
And that's why I think the task becomes tougher, both for the brand owner as well as for people like us from the industry, Saby, media, creative, because large part of marketing has been driven for many decades in different parts of the world through FMCG, through the CPG segments, right? And they've defined the marketing rules or the media principle that we follow today. But as you rightly mentioned, that this is a different ballgame, right? And therefore, the way we approach this to the consumer, how we showcase it in Vietnam, knowing the Vietnamese consumer is again of a different behavior that they demonstrate. How are we going to leverage and how are we then going to solve this challenge or work towards solving this challenge in 2026? And that's the part we will discuss further.
So I would like to jump in to build on Saby's ideas regarding to the KOL. So if we work in the deep science industry like healthcare or other similar industry, the decision to choose the KOL is really important. It's not about a singer, it's not about celebrity, it's not about TikToker, but the authenticities that also Saby highlight. For example, MSD, we collaborate with Ministry of Health to choose the very high-profile celebrities to have that authenticity, to have that endorsement. That is Anh Tuấn in this year, and also real case sharing from Harry Wong that she experienced with that disease. And more than that, we also engage with the key medical opinion leaders. That is the scientific QL, scientific leaders have the deep expertise in the medical field, but also have the multi-platform and have many followers online. So their ideas, their speech, their message is well trusted by the communities. So I just remind that choose the KOL is not easy in the healthcare sectors.
Absolutely. Okay. Great. I think that's so interesting, very valid, and I think we have experienced that, and we are absolutely extremely focused on that one right now, and that makes a big difference. Amit, what do you think? You are in the industry, what are you looking at? What are you?
So actually, listening to you, Luan, from a brand's perspective of what you want to do and what kind of challenges are you foreseeing for future, right? And Saby, what you mentioned about bringing in trust, building the whole comms for different set of audiences, the way that all of this will then land onto certain platforms is where we can play a role, right? So at our company, we are looking at the best combination of media science in collaboration with the latest technology, which helps us map through different audiences, because that's what we spoke about, from urban to rural to different age groups, who are not just beneficiaries, but also decision makers from a parent's lens. And the third layer that I'm putting in is how do you build trust? And how do you still convince somebody of a futuristic problem, but take an action today, right? So there are platforms, there are formats which jointly can address, this. And to the point, Saby, that you asked, so from a media lens, formats which help us say the story in a shorter way, convincing way. So there are shorter formats as well as long formats, a combination of those two. Brand message will play an important role, unlike other FMCG where brand message are generally, losing their relevance if not connecting with the audience. But here, what brand says or the promise that you make to take care of somebody's health is quite important. That overlap with an expertise voice, as you rightly said in the example that you gave for what MSD did, latching on to what we have seen as a trend of infotainment. So infotainment is something that's been growing in Vietnam, right? So people have been using, let's say, certain platforms for watching videos, but it's not limited just for entertainment. There's information being shared, both critical, worthy of shopping, as you mentioned about commerce and other things. But how do you make sure that this information, serious information, is still landed in a manner that is acceptable to an audience? Because sometimes a lot of serious content may not be well accepted or given enough attention, right? So platform choices which have natural infotainment capability to say the story that we want to say. The other part that media can help and bring this to life is also the fact of having a third voice through an expert, but through certain content and partnerships, right? Because when you bring alive the importance of this preventive healthcare, of keeping alive real stories, and the example that you shared is quite strong, right? Both when you build a storytelling like that from a person who has gone through that journey, people understand and people really feel these right emotion that they should take the decision to also go for the preventive healthcare step. So I think knowing the challenge is important, which you have already listed on, and what therefore can be solved from a lens of storytelling, communications, heavy as you mentioned, and then the right choices of platforms, both from long form storytelling to a shorter videos, overlapping with an expert's voice, right? I think as a collaboration, we can all pick up something for our audiences as well. So that brings us towards the end of our session. But before we close, I'm very keen to ask you, what is this one thing that you want to leave our audiences with on for 2026? Something that you think is going to be important in that year?
So for me, it's the responsible marketing. Responsible for what? For the content that we deliver to the customer, not overclaim, not insufficient, not incomprehensive data that we provide to the customer. Not only the user, but also the professionals, the healthcare provider, for example. We have to give the complete pictures to them. Yeah. And responsible for the value that we relate to the community. Yes. If we sell the healthy product, we have to deliver the deep science information to the community with the emotional bonding, so they can understand the emotional benefit and functional benefit, and they have the informed choice when they make the decisions. So in short, responsible marketing.
Brilliant. And Saby, what's in it for you as 2026?
I think the big one is going to be about the sort of way marketing and marketing communication, media, the entire ecosystem will start to address categories which are deep science categories, which are sort of looking at marketing beyond FMCG and really trying to because as the economy is evolving, as market is evolving, Vietnam, there are other categories and we talked about it in the people's, those things being really relevant for people's lives. And how should marketing really build preference or choices or make choices easier for consumers for those categories, which would mean really looking at there is a tremendous sort of possibilities with AI coming in. There is a significant amount of personalization now possible with data. We are familiar with that. We are all doing that. But I think we need to now start to focus a lot more on what I call behavior design in our communication, in the way we look at media, even not just content, but how do we really place it in front of people. You mentioned, infotainment, a lot of that. So I think, to me, that is going to be the big ticket in 2026 and beyond. And that's quite exciting, actually.
Great. So responsible marketing to creating stories and be in line with behavioral science and how to impact consumers, right? And the bill that we spoke about, that from media, the whole journey of personalization, and that can be enabled today with the advent of AI, right? Because we have been talking about personalization, but not at scale. But today that's possible, and that's where media and technology join hands, right? It was absolute pleasure talking to Luan and Saby. A lot of insights for our audiences to pick up. We'll look forward to connecting again with you in the next season. But for now, stay tuned for more to come for next episode at MMA Podcast 2025. Ciao from Amit.